observe justice in, and how do we do that? The four relationships are the first, the internal, our relationship with the self. Second, the relationship with the divine, the creator. Third is the environmental relationship, our relationship with the environment, with the resources that have been bestowed upon us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fourth is the social relationship, our relationship with everyone else from the human race. Real happiness, eternal happiness, tranquility is conditional to observing justice in all four relationships. Now we understand that justice is to place things where they belong. Now that we understand what is meant by the four relationships, now we want to go deeper into this topic and try to understand how to observe justice in these four relationships. And as you can see, this is a very broad discussion. This acts as a framework, an outline, if you like. Because these topics, every word that I'll be mentioning by itself requires a further discussion and a further elaboration. Just want to set our mind to understand this framework, to understand this outline, alaykum salam, and then go deeper into it in the future, inshallah. With respect to our relationship with ourselves, the internal relationship, how do I observe justice with myself? Because sometimes I could be unjust towards myself. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in alluding to this point, says, وَمَا ظَلَمْنَاهُمْ وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. We have not wronged them, but they're the ones who have wronged themselves. They're the ones that have committed injustice towards themselves. How do I commit injustice towards myself? Well, let's ask the opposite question. How do I become just towards myself? Because there are many ways and many things that can be said about being unjust toward ourselves. But how do we observe justice with ourselves? Two things. Number one, to know the purpose of why we exist. I wake up in this dunya and I realize that I am something. I am distinguished from other people because every human has their own identity. Right? Nobody is similar to anybody else, even their own twin. You have your own unique personality. Well, who gave you that personality? Who gave you that existence, and why? For what reason? And what are you supposed to do with it? What is your potential? How do you get there? All these questions can be summed up in knowing the purpose of our existence. That's number one. Number two, to preserve the self from anything that can divert it from reaching its purpose. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. So number one, to know the purpose. Number two, to preserve and protect the self from anything that can divert it from that purpose. So this means that if I don't know the purpose of why I'm here, I have done injustice to myself. If I am a person that lives in this life like any other species, other than the human species, I don't know, I just eat, sleep, have fun, and that's it. This is a person who has done injustice to themselves. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. And number two, if I know the purpose, but I don't protect and preserve myself from diverting from that purpose, because there are many temptations in this life that strive and work hard to divert us from achieving the purpose. Now you know the purpose, it is right there, and you're trying to go and make it to that destination. But then there are many things calling you to come this way and that way. They're trying to divert you from that straight path to that purpose. By allowing these temptations to take you right and left, you have also done injustice to yourself. What about our relationship with our Creator? How can we do injustice to our Creator? Well, number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Creator, the omnipotent, the omniscient, He's beyond and beyond and beyond, and nobody can hurt Him in any way, shape, or form. So the question from the beginning seems a little bit odd. What do you mean, how do I do injustice to my Lord? Well, let's go back to the definition of justice. Justice is what? To place everything where they belong. Injustice is what? to place things where they don't belong. So how do I do injustice to my creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, again, let's switch the question and then we'll understand injustice. How do I become just towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Number one, to acknowledge his absolute ownership and that he is worthy of all praise, gratitude, and submission. That is number one. If I acknowledge that everything in the entire universe, including myself, is owned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he's the creator ultimately, right? And that because of this, he's worthy of all praise and gratitude, and he deserves submission, then I have met the first condition of justice. And this has to do with what? This has to do with belief. So far, I haven't done anything. But I recognize and acknowledge that this entity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, deserves gratitude. I haven't done gratitude yet. He deserves gratitude. He deserves praise. And he deserves to be submitted to. I have met condition number one. Condition number two says, I need to recognize the divine emissaries and the purified guides who represent the straight path leading to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in following that path. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So again, to recognize the luminary guides that represent the straight path that lead me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in following that path. So the first thing, I recognize that he's worthy of gratitude, worthy of submission, worthy of all praise. Second thing, I have to recognize and I have to identify the guides that represent the true path. Because as we live in this world and read the history, we find that there have been thousands and thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that have called to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their own way. And most of the times they are contradictory to one another. One says, come to my God who is three in one. One says, come to my God who's sitting over the seventh heaven in a throne. And the third says, come to my God who comes down every Friday on a donkey. And the fourth one says, come to my God who has manifested in a cow. And the fifth one says in the sixth one, and there's one that says, come to my God who there's nothing like. Come to my God who's transcendent. Come to my God who is absolute, who is omnipotent, who has no deficiency, no limitation. These are different gods that we're talking about. They're not the same. That's why religious plurality, in the sense of saying all of them, all roads lead to Rome, that is invalid logically and philosophically. Why? Because how can believing that God, number one, or God being described as three in one, is the same as believing in God that is one, absolutely one. Well, God is either one or he's the three in one. They're two different things. It's like saying you're trying to go to this destination, right? You're trying to go, let's say, to Europe, a country in Europe. And there are only so many routes that go there. Somebody can tell you, yeah, but I can take you to Mars and that will still take you there. That would be, conflicting route with this route. There's no way that a route that's going to Mars is going to get you there, and a route that is going to Europe is, this is the one that's going to get you there. The other one will not get you there. Therefore, which one is going to get you where you want to go to? You can't say if you believe in either route, it's the same thing. They all lead to the same. No, they don't lead to the same destination. You can think of other examples. But religious plurality here is invalid because you have multiple explanations of what God is. And the reality of God is not multiple, it's only one. If I describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as this, and someone else describes him as something else, which one is he? You can't say he is all these descriptions, because these descriptions are what? They usually amount to contradiction. If one says he is a composite and the other says he's absolute, how do you reconcile between the two? The fact that he's a composite, that means he's composed and made out of parts. The other one says he's absolute. He cannot be made out of parts. So how can you reconcile between the two? There's no way you can reconcile between the two. So therefore, we can't accept that sense or that kind of religious plurality. Yes, we accept the fact that the idea that says religious pluralism means that we coexist. Yeah, we coexist with everyone. That's fine. We have no problem with that. But to say that we're all right and that all of these religions and all the ideologies lead to the same thing, that is absolutely nonsense. So how do we do justice to our Creator? Number one, to acknowledge His absolute ownership. He's worthy of praise, worthy of gratitude and submission. Number two, to recognize the luminary guides that represent the one path or the multi-path. It's the one path, the singular path. In fact, in the Holy Quran, when you read As-Sirat al-Mustaqim, show me one verse that says surat, the plural of sirat. Never. Cover to cover. Sirat. Why sirat? Because there's one sirat. But because sirat is a very abstract concept, and we humans want something concrete, something tangible, what does Allah do? He says, صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. He says it's the sirat represented by certain individuals who Allah has bestowed His favor upon. Who are these individuals? He says they are the prophets, they are the messengers, they are the imams. And this is where we ask the question, who are those who are immune from deviation? Because they represent what? As-sirat. So a prophet cannot be prone to mistake, prone to error, prone to sin. Why? Because that would defeat the purpose of them being what? A representation of what? As-sirat, the absolute straight path. Any diversion here or there is a form of deviation and defeats the purpose of sirat. If I give you a measure and I say this device can measure your fever, for example, if you have fever, God forbid, I give you a thermometer and I tell you that thermometer works accurately. You can use it on 1,000 people and it will give you accurate numbers. But if I tell you sometimes it's deficient, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, can you take the chance and use it with your patients as a physician, for example? As a nurse, for example? No, because it's not going to give you accurate results. It can tell you that the fever, let's say, is this much, while in reality it's much higher, and God forbid this is going to risk that patient's life. So you say, I can't depend on a deficient thermometer. So how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send us a deficient path? A path that is not immune from error, not immune from mistake. And the path is not something that we can see. It's represented by who? By individuals. And these individuals are what? The prophets, the messengers, the imams. So therefore they must be infallible. And this is where we ask the question, after the demise of Rasulullah, who continues that straight path? Is there an infallible, or we can resort to anyone and therefore we no longer have a straight path? In fact, reality shows that after the demise of Rasulullah, once Ali ibn Abi Talib was removed from his position, what happened? How many madhahib do we have today? How many sects? How many ideologies? The Muslim ummah has been divided into pieces and pieces and pieces. It's wrong to think that it's only 4 madhahib. These are just jurisprudential madhahib. These are the madhahib that remained, and these are jurisprudential, meaning this is just the legal system. These are fuqaha. We're not even talking about the real difference which manifests in the different ideological groups. We have the Asha'ira, the Mu'tazila, the Ahlul Hadith, who breeded Al-Salafiyya, who breeded Al-Wahhabiyya, and many other groups. All these people say we are the actual Islam. And all this happened because of what? Because we have left the straight path. Because the straight path is one, but there are many other paths that are outside of the straight path. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And this is very key here, the last part, غير المغضوب عليهم. You cannot follow someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry with. That is fundamental. So when someone says, why do you Shia study history and have standpoints against this person and loyalty towards that person? Well, it's because of Surah Al-Fatiha. Because Surah Al-Fatiha says, follow sirat al-ladhina an'am Allah alayhim, and do not follow sirat of those who Allah is angry with and those who have gone astray. So now we have 3 groups of people. those who have gone astray, those who Allah is angry with, and those who Allah bestowed His favor upon. Well, which ones of the Sahaba fall under the first, which one fall into the second, and which one fall into the third? So I can be careful not to follow al-dhalin and al-maghdubi alayhim. I'll give you a quick hint and then we'll go on to the other points. Allah has made His anger manifested through the anger of Rasulullah. And Rasulullah has clearly says, whoever angers Fatima has angered me. So if in history I end up finding there's a Sahabi that has angered Fatima, not only angered her, she died angry with him, according to Sahih al-Bukhari, then please excuse me for saying that I have a standpoint against that person, and I do not respect that person. I consider that person as a maghdubi alayh, maghdubun alayh. And therefore I'm not going to have any loyalty towards him or respect. He's your figure, you can respect him all you want. But you can't impose that on me and tell me that, well, because he's a companion, you have to consider him as a role model and a leader for you. I can't, because Surah Al-Fatiha says otherwise. Between me and you and between all Muslimin and Muslimat, the criterion is what today? The Quran. We come to the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha, that we recite at least 10 times a day in our salah, says, be careful. Sirat of whom? Sirat al-ladina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Pay attention here. Maghdubi alayhim were mentioned before al-dhalin, because they're worse. In fact, today, we cannot describe all Muslims as maghdubi alayhim if they don't embrace the school of the Ahlul Bayt. No, that's not fair. There are few that are maghdubi alayhim, and nawasib, like those who have bombed or killed the innocent people in Matrah of Oman just recently, a couple of days ago. These are nawasib. These are people who have animosity towards Ahlul Bayt and towards their followers. But the general Muslim population are not like that. These are people who have been misguided. And a lot of them are misguided not because they choose to be misguided. No. They received an Islam that is packaged in such a way, and it is really hard for them to read outside of that reading that they have. And maybe Allah will excuse them on the Day of Judgment. We don't know. We're not here to judge. But we're here to say that we have to be very careful in the path that we choose, making sure that is the path that takes us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to ascertain that it is indeed the straight path and that it is not a diverted image or a diverted version of Islam. So this is doing justice to whom? To Allah. Doing justice to Allah is by doing what? By recognizing that He's worthy of praise, gratitude, and submission, and by walking and following the path of those who Allah has bestowed His favor upon, and not just anyone. So therefore, if I follow someone and I take my religion from someone who has not been appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first person I have done injustice to is whom? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because now I have placed my devotion in my following where it doesn't belong. It belongs with Ali ibn Abi Talib. It belongs with Rasulullah. It belongs with Isa, with Musa, with Ibrahim. Yet what did I do? In the time of Ibrahim, I placed it in Namrud. In the time of Musa, I placed it with the Fir'aun. I placed it with the enemies of Isa alayhi salam, and so on and so forth. That is why the magicians during Musa's time, they were the top magicians of Egypt. When they were brought before Fir'aun, he has promised them so much reward, and they were ready to defeat Musa alayhi salam. As soon as they realized this Musa was not playing a game, but rather this was a miracle, because they know the trick, and they realize he's not doing a trick. He's actually bringing a stick and is turning into a real snake that began to eat their own ropes. They realized that Fir'aun is not the right path, and that the right path is represented by whom? By Musa. What did they do? They gave their lives to be with Musa and not with Fir'aun. Otherwise, all roads can lead to Roma. No, that is not accepted. There's only one path that leads to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 3, how does one do injustice to the environment? Always we switch the question. Well, how do I do justice to the environment? Number 1, to acknowledge that our relationship with all the resources that surround us is a relationship of a trustee and not an owner. Keep that in mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and spend from that which He has made you trustees in. So Allah has made us what? Owners of the resources on the earth? No. You're not the owner. You're a trustee. Oh, trustee. What does that mean? Well, what does a trustee mean? Someone who's entrusted to use something to a specific extent, which means you cannot hoard things and act like you're the owner. And that's what's going on today in the world. Those who have power want to hoard everything, want to take the possessions and the assets and just confiscate everything that others have and give them what they choose to give them. Hence, what do we have as a result of this? Poverty. Poverty is that imbalance in distribution. The commander of the faithful, peace and blessings be upon him, is a very famous word, says, مَا جَاءَ غَنِيٌّ إِلَّا بِمَا مُتِّعَ بِهِ فَقِيرٌ. There's nobody who, مَا جَاءَ فَقِيرٌ إِلَّا بِمَا مُتِّعَ بِهِ غَنِيٌّ. There's no poor that is hungry except because there is a wealthy or a rich that is enjoying that portion that belongs to that poor. This is when we treat the resources as what? As ours. You know, when you have a family, not going to name names, a family that comes from a Bedouin society, barely know how to wash themselves, and all of a sudden they say, this entire region belongs to our family. In fact, we're going to change the name of that entire region to our family name. What do you call this? This is an absolute example of confiscating an entire asset, an entire wealth of the Muslim community. This land that has millions and millions of Muslims, very, very rich history, is now confiscated by one Bedouin family, claiming that it is theirs. I've never seen a country in the world being named after a family, except that place, which you can search in Google, and you may be figuring it out by now. Anyhow, and spend from that which He has made you trusteed in. We are trustees in this resources. We cannot hoard them. Number two, to be just with the environment is to utilize everything in the environment, all the resources, in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to use it or utilize it in a way that does what? That amounts to disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the most disrespectful thing we can do towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like somebody says, I'm coming to give you a set of tools so that you can cook. So I'm going to give you a stove, I'm going to give you food, I'm going to give you, silverware. I take this silverware, right, from this generous person, and I take the oven, and the first thing I do is I go to the most precious pictures of that generous person, I bring them and I burn them in this oven, and then I take the knives and I start stabbing the loved ones in the family of that generous person. What do you call that kind of person? Very generous, he came, he gave you all these things, and all of a sudden now you are using the same things that he has given you to destroy his loved ones. That is exactly what some people do when they use the blessings, the ni'am, the bounties, the resources that Allah has given them to do what? To do wrong. We're so proud that we have technology and that we've reached a very good, level of knowledge, but unfortunately, most of the way this knowledge has been used is what? Is absolutely insane and evil. How? Just look at the situation in Gaza and you know what I mean. The weapons that are being used, the bombs that are being used, this is all a result of what? Our advancement. Look, if we have remained in the past where to get into a war, you were going to use swords and knives, the damages today wouldn't be as much as what we see. But today, with one button, with one, small atomic bomb or whatever it may be, you can destroy so much. And that's what's happening. And we call that advancement. This is the wrong use of the ni'am of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Instead of these types of inventions being at the service of humanity, they are being at the what? At the destruction of humanity. Last but not least, social justice. How do we achieve social justice? Two things as well. You have realized for relationships, every relationship, two things constitute and shape justice towards that relationship or in that relationship. The last but not least is social justice. Number one, to know the rights upon us and the duties of others towards us. These are very important, these two. To know the rights of others upon us and to know their duties towards us, means our rights upon them. Why is that important? I'll come to it in point number two. To not neglect their rights and not to expect more from them than what they are obligated to do towards us. Because oftentimes we have a imbalance in our relationships because we don't know the limits of our expectations. If I don't know what my spouse's right is upon me, there's a good chance I will not give them their right. If I don't know what my right is upon them, there's a good chance I will be asking them for something that is beyond my right. So to set it straight, I need to know my rights and my duties, and I need to know their rights and their duties, and not expect more of them and not neglect the rights that they have upon me. As a Muslim community, there are rights that must be fulfilled by every individual. Spousal rights. You can't say, as a husband, I can't spend on my wife. I choose not to. I can, but I choose not to. Have her brother spend on her. Say no. That does not waive her right to be spent on by you as a husband. But there are rights that we can call rights that are communal, meaning that the community, the entire community, must fulfill that right of a Muslim individual. But if one of them does it, it falls from the shoulders of the rest of the community, which is known as al-wajib al-kifai, for example. God forbid you have a Muslim who has lost their life, and they don't have a wali, someone who has the walaya, the guardianship to take care of him, like let's say their eldest son, for instance, and they don't have a trustee that is to execute, their will by preparing them and so on and so forth. Who's now responsible for taking care of that person and burying them and preparing them? The entire community. When does it fall off their shoulders? If at least one person who can suffice and do it, it will fall off the shoulders of the rest. They say in Kitab Siratul A'imma by a Shaykh or a Sayyid Hashim Ma'ruf al-Hasani from our ulama from Jabal Amil, a great scholar who had written a book on the Sirah of the 12 Imams. In this, he says that Imam Zayn al-Abidin, our beloved fourth Imam, one day saw a stranger. And Ahlul Bayt, one of their qualities is what? Samaha, generosity. So he went and he says, you're my host. I'm your host today. I'm hosting you. So he brings him and he hosts other Muslims with him, and they sit, they have a good time, they eat. And then he looks at him, and Imam has a point in raising this question. He says to him, I want to ask you a question. You said you're a stranger. God forbid if something happens to you and you die. Do you think you're going to stay without burial? He says, before he responded, the people that were sitting, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, or son of Rasulullah, we will take care of him, of course. That's not even a question. Why would you ask him this? If God forbid something happens to him, we will take care of him. This is our duty. This is wajib kifaya. Wajibun kifai. We have to take care of him. And I told you that Imam Zayn al-Abidin had a point. He didn't just ask this question for no reason. He right away turned and says, with tears, he says, but my father, Abu Abdullah, was left for 3 days. He was a stranger who was left for 3 days on the plains of Karbala. That was his point. Imam Zayn al-Abidin took every opportunity that he can take to ignite the emotions towards Imam Hussein and towards Karbala. You know the story when he goes near a person who's butchering animals and he says to him, "O butcher, have you given this sheep water prior to butchering it?" And he answers and he says, "Of course, it's one of the sunan, it's mustahab to give water to the sheep before you slaughter it." He says, "But my father Hussein was slaughtered, beheaded like a ram on the plains of Karbala while he was thirsty. Asked for water, but they did not give him any water." And he goes on and on and on, and he continues to mention the tragedies of Karbala. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalabin yanqalibun wal aqibatu lil muttaqin. I'm at your service for the next 10 minutes if you have any questions, inshallah, whether it is in relationship to the topic or outside the topic. If I know the answer, inshallah, I would answer. Go ahead, sister, yes. If we have the microphone, please, Sayyid Kadhim Adam. Thank you, Dr. Munzawi.
Hello.
Go ahead, sister.
I know history is very complicated, and you have sources that are old, and a lot of time has passed, and there are a lot of controversies. Can you just lighten with things that are commonly misconceptions that we understand from Karbala that in reality is different than what we were told, or
That's a tough question because every culture has a different way of expressing and narrating Karbala, right? There are commonalities that we all agree upon. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was murdered, was killed, brutally, his children, his companion, and so on and so forth. But I would have to see the story that, for example, or the incident, and then see if we have it in our authentic books of hadith. Now, here's the problem with the stories of Karbala. It's not a problem, but this is what we can call the dilemma for most people. Number one, we have so many sources, and some of these sources are early, and some of them are later. The problem is when you come to a later source, the writer of that source is someone like Ad-Darbandi in Asrar al-Shahadat. He's a alim. He's not just a normal person. He's a righteous alim. So I have full trust that he's not going to lie to me. The problem is when he writes the stories, and there's about 1,000 years between him and Karbala, so I don't know the chain. I trust that he must have found the source somewhere, because sources are of two types. They're either manuscripts that have not been printed, and some of them have been lost, and some of them have been printed. So if you say, okay, where'd you get this from? He'll say, I got it from that book. We don't find that book in our library. What do we do? He says, oh, I found that book. I used to have it, and it got burnt. Because I trust him as an alim, I know he's not lying to me. But had it been someone else, I would raise many question marks and say, hold on. How come it's only you that found that book? What about the others? How come they didn't find that book? So, well, I found it. It's not my problem others didn't find that source. So the issue with these stories, historical, events, it's hard to trace all of them. But what makes life easy is that we're not responsible to know the details of what happened in Karbala. If we read, for example, a Shaykh al-Mufid, one of our authentic sources, if we read a Shaykh al-Saduq, these are old maqatil. They may not be very long and deep and lengthy, but they do the job. I can read the maqtal to you in 30, 40 minutes. I'll give you a lot of the narrations that are commonly accepted in the original books, but someone else might come and say, no, Sayyid, I don't like you for doing this. I want to hear the 3-hour one. Why? Because it has more stories, more details. Well, I'm not comfortable reading the 3-hour ones, not because my voice is weak, but also because I'm not comfortable with a lot of the narrations. Not that they are not authentic. I just don't know their source. So that's my problem, not the book's problem. So the idea goes back to we as a community, we as lovers of Ahl Bayt, should not be very much keen on the extra details that is not relevant. Let's be focused on the principles. Let's focus on the values and focus on that which is agreed upon. The tragedies that indeed nobody can argue against. Amma annahu, exactly how many arrows, exactly how many soldiers, exactly what time it was, exactly what he was wearing, these are not very relevant to the actual event itself.
Okay, another question I have
Sure.
is that would it be better to do sadqa jariya for your parents, or would it be better to take care of
Their wajibat.
yeah.
Ahsanti. Of course, their wajibat are a priority. If I have a marhum who has not paid his zakah, he has not fasted or has not prayed, well, these are wajibat. They're not going to ask him about a sadaqah jariyah on the day of judgment. They're going to say, well, why didn't you pray? Why don't you fast? Why don't you do this? So let me satisfy the obligations. After that, then we can go on to sadaqah jariyah and mustahabbat. Ahsant.
Okay, thank you. That was a very organized and very detailed
Thank
lecture that you gave us. Very.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Hajj.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes.
I have two questions, both related to your topic. My first question is, what is the difference between adl and qist? And then my second question, you talk about religious pluralism. One of the, this is kind of in vogue now, and looking back history, like 3,000-4,000 years back, some of the atheists say, well, they bring examples like Prophet Ibrahim going and destroying the statues, and then I don't know how accurate the story is, but putting the thing to the axe, to put it on one of them and say
on the biggest one.
On the
That's
biggest one.
actually there in our literature
yeah,
as well.
So they take that into today's norms and standards, that you don't go to somebody else's religious place and do that.
This is what we call taking the event out of context, right? It's like you come to someone 1,000 years ago where it was very common that when a child does something, for example, bad outside, that 1,000 years ago, that father was very common that if they were to slap that child, it is seen as a normal way of raising your child. You bring that same story to someone today who's working on, child's rights, for example, and says, oh my God, this is abuse. This is taking things outside of context. So we cannot study something by bringing a piece of the puzzle, engaging that puzzle based on our standards today. That is the exact injustice that we do a lot of times to history. We have to keep in mind that there are different norms in every society and different ways for expressing and protesting. Today, you protest against injustice by doing what? You go out in the street and you protest. Well, during Ibrahim's time, the best way for him to protest was to go and break the idols who he saw as a cancer to society. And in order to defeat that cancer, you need to break it so that people can understand that this cannot do anything good to them. This cannot harm them, nor it can benefit them. How does he do that? He tried speaking to them, but intellects did not get it. They need something tangible. They need something to be practiced. So what did he do? He broke all of them and left the biggest one. He says, oh, perhaps the biggest one did it. Now he provoked their minds and they can, hold on. This is a statue. It can't do anything. So, it can't do anything. Then why are you worshiping it? Why are you considering it to be a god? So he wanted to reform through the breaking. He wasn't there to go and attack people's goods, because this was not a good. This was something that is threatening the society as a whole. If somebody's working on a bomb in their house, pay attention to this example, right? It's their house, their property, okay? And they have this building, it says, we produce bombs here, God forbid, right? And you see it, authorities find out about it, and they say, okay, we're going to go to that house, we're going to destroy that manufactory or that machine that is making these bombs, because this person is saying, as soon as I get all this stuff together, I'm going to blow up the entire community. Can you say, well, you have to respect other people's rights? Let this person continue to manufacture in his own home and do as he likes, because this is a free society. Or you say, no, this person is going to harm the entire society. I'm going to go and destroy that house. Ibrahim saw and identified leaving these idols is going to destroy the community as a whole, destroy the faith of the community, destroy the hereafter of these people. And he loves them and he wants the best for them, including his uncle or his maternal grandfather. So therefore he went and he done that. The other question you had was about, just remind me the first one. Adl and qist. So there are different ways of explaining them or defining them in the Arabic language. One of that I've seen, which seems to be to an extent accurate, but I still have to look back and do more research, is that adl is very general. Qist has to do with the people in charge of authority. So qist is the person, qist is the act of ensuring justice on the larger scale, on the political level. Whereas adl could be inclusive of that, and adl even on an individual level. Like we said, adl with yourself, adl with your spouse, right? But when you do adl with your entire ra'iyah, the community that you're leading, that could be referred to as qist. Again, that's one of the explanations. Dr. Yaqub, please.
You might wanna you might want to call this an argument.
Sure, sure, definitely.
Question.
Bring it up
Um,
or bring it to the table.
But just like you said, justice is one of the most difficult terms to define. I mean, anthropologists try to define it different than socialists and
Correct.
such. And then the philosophers also try to define it differently, and the religious people also define it differently. But the two definitions that you mentioned, they do exist. The putting things to where they belong,
Ahsan.
and then
Giving people the
giving
rights they
people
deserve.
what they deserve.
Mhm.
Then we go back and we have questions there, like
Mm.
the word deserve, like
Who decides? Who
what I
deserves?
deserve?
Ahsan.
And then putting things where they belong, who decide where things belong?
Let
So
me
then
answer
we-
that point, and then you go on to the second point. So
Yes.
we're not lost because these are very deep discussions.
Right.
Number one, as a Muslim who believes that the path to justice has to come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we believe that He's the main source of deciding who deserves what. So He sets the limits. He says the wife has this much right, the husband has this much right, the leader has this much right, the father has this much right, the father, the son, the mother, and so on and so forth. And the second is the most basic rights. This is what aql is able to comprehend.
But then it contradicts
Thank you.
the fact that, the example that you brought is really good. The example that says the causes of poverty, for example.
Mm.
And I think the causes of poverty is based on the definition that you brought. It's like, why would I deserve this? I deserve better than this, but I can't. So I think the
There's
best
no limitations
suitable definition of
Yes, go
justice is let people climb the mountain and support those who don't know where the mountain is or who can't climb up the mountain.
But there's no conflict here. We're not saying that. When we say give people the right they deserve, you as a human being deserve the right to be educated, deserve the right to get into business and become richer than Bill Gates. We're not saying you have a limitation as to what you can do. You deserve equal rights, but there are certain things that govern society that has nothing to do with assets. For example, your role. What is your rights as a teacher and what is your role? These things are defined. What is your rights as a husband, as a wife, as a child, as a parent? These are defined, but these are not setting limitations. They're setting the minimum boundaries that maintain the respect and the justice in society.
In society, though,
Mm.
They do put limitations in society.
So don't bring culture into this. Because if you bring culture into this, then we're talking about two different things, right? Yeah. Religion, if it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's fair. Everything Allah sets, even if it's a limitation. If it comes from Allah, now here's the key. If it comes from Allah, but if it comes from my wrong understanding, as a person who doesn't know much, then it's not religion's problem. It's my understanding that is flawed. That's why we have to differentiate between religion, that which is based on solid proof from the Quran and the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and that which is based on personal conclusions, even though they could be garmented or covered with a religious authority garment, like a turban, for example. Just because I have a turban on my head, it doesn't mean that everything I say represents Islam 100%. No, sometimes it could be a flawed idea of mine that I think is Islamic, but in reality is not Islamic. It's just my own wrong understanding.
Sayyid,
Ahsantu.
if you can do that last question you received so we can get to Dua Kumail, please.
Inshallah. So the question says, what is my duty as an eldest child if my father was not paid the khums when bought the house for us? So when you buy a house, okay, when you purchase a home, if you use the money to purchase the home that you have from that same year, it's not saved from previous years, then there's no khums because that's an expense. But if the money has been saved over the years and you've never paid khums on that money, then that money you want to tell me how much, for example, it is estimated to be, let's say $10,000, then your father owes $2,000, but you as a child is not responsible for paying your father's khums, unless you want to do it out of your own will. If he's living, then you give it to him. But if he has not living, then this is where you give it out of goodwill to satisfy his duty with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ahsantum. I think I have a last question on the message here. Yeah, why didn't the husband of Lady Zainab, Kulthum, join Imam Hussein in Karbala? Okay. Okay, very good. This goes back to the very general question of why so-and-so did not participate. Whether it is Muhammad al-Hanafiya, Ibn al-Hanafiya, the brother of Imam Hussein, whether it is Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, the husband of Lady Zainab. There's something that some of our ulama consider a good approach to reconcile between why they didn't participate and between why they still deserve to be respected. There are two types of people. There are people that we know are not good people. These are the people that we're not going to give them benefit of the doubt. Abdullah bin Umar, I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt for not helping Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I will not give him the benefit of the doubt. There's a lot of question marks around him. He was, to an extent, an evil person. But when you tell me Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, righteous person, lover of the Ahlul Bayt, but he didn't go, I have to find what? احمل أخاك على أحسن المحامل, right? ضع أمر أخيك على أحسنه. So what do ulama do here to give him the benefit of the doubt? They say perhaps Imam Hussein needed him to remain in Medina to keep a balance in the roles. We need someone in Medina. Because what happens when the caravan comes back? We need someone to take care of them. If they all go and get killed and then Sayyidah Zainab and the women come back to Medina, they have nobody there, and we have a problem. And history shows that when Zainab came back, Abdullah bin Ja'far al-Tayyar, with his wealth, with whatever, he was able, because he was wealthy, he was able to take care of them because they were looted in Karbala. They came back with nothing except some of the things that, according to history, that Yazid gave them after he looted everything from them. So now they came back to Karbala. They need someone to support them. Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, some say he was ill. Some say Imam Hussein intentionally wanted to leave him as an eye to watch out for things in what is going on in Medina. So there's multiple possibilities as to why these individuals did not participate in Karbala, as to why they didn't go to Yazid and why they did not take the sabaya back from them. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. They did not have the means. They did not have the means. You have someone like Yazid with all the power, and the prisoners are with him, and me and you who have nothing to do. If we go there, he'll kill us immediately. So they had no way. Yes, some of the companions of the Ahlul Bayt tried to, but they couldn't. There were a couple of tries, a couple of battles throughout the way of the Sabaya, but they could not do it. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Are you reciting Dua Kumail?
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا دائم الفضل على البرية، يا باسط اليدين بالعطية، يا صاحب المواهب السنية، صل على محمد وآله خير الورى سجية، واغفر لنا يا ذا العلا في هذه العشية. صلوات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء، وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء، وخضع له كل شيء، وذل له كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي غلبت غلبت بها كل شيء، وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك، وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع، أن تسامحني وترحمني، وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته، وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك، وعلى مكانك، وخفي مكرك، وظهر أمرك، ولغلب قهرك، وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا، ولا لقبائحي ساترا، ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت. سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي، ظلمت نفسي، ظلمت نفسي، وتجرأت بجهلي، وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت، وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلت، وكم من عثار وقيت، وكم من مكروه دفعت، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي، وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها، ومقالي يا سيدي. فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي بفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك، أسأله كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فقرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء. فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعد أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك. ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ذري وفكني من شد وطاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وصالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعد إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، فلا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك. يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أذج وأبكي؟ لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأذجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيجا آملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك، فلا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك. لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملاها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بذري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، واعتف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا رب مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، فبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته قنا، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابق النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. نصار روح تمام شهداء اسلام. الفاتحه مع الصلوات.
توكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت، والحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. وصلى الله على محمد وآله وسلم. اجمل صلوات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على دينك وصل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. حول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف وصل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله بسم الله وبالله. الأسماء الحسنى كلها لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد النبي وعلى ذريته وعلى أهل بيته. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن عليا ولي الله، أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد، الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده،
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده
الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. حول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده
الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا ولي العافية نسألك العفو والعافية عافية الدين والدنيا والآخرة. اللهم صل على محمد وعترته الطاهرة.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. بسم الله وبالله. الأسماء الحسنى كلها لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري أفي سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء، أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، ومأخذه قريبا،